The screaming echoed through volcanic rock tunnels beneath Mount Suribachi. February 23, 1945, brought terror that no Japanese military manual had ever described. Superior Private Tadashi Yamamoto pressed his pencil against diary pages. His hands shook uncontrollably. This would be his final written words. Hell itself had arrived on tracks of steel. The Americans brought mechanical demons that breathed liquid death. These metal beasts defied everything the Imperial Japanese Army understood about warfare. Through his narrow observation slit, carved into volcanic stone, Yamamoto witnessed destruction that shattered his worldview completely. A Sherman tank approached through the morning haze. Nothing distinguished it from dozens supporting the Marine advance. Then, eruption. Torrents of liquid fire burst from the tank's gun barrel. Burning napalm consumed 3 concealed pillboxes within seconds. Defenders who never suspected the approaching Sherman carried anything beyond its standard 75mm cannon were instantly incinerated. 2,000 Japanese defenders of the 109th Division huddled in suffocating tunnel darkness. They listened to screams bouncing through stone passages. Their military doctrine contained no answers for such weapons. American ingenuity had transformed ordinary tanks into instruments that would completely destroy Japanese defensive strategy throughout the Pacific. The crisis actually started much earlier. Bougainville, January 30, 1944. The Hornet's Nest represented a complex network of interconnected Japanese bunkers. Conventional assaults had failed for weeks against this position. Marine casualties climbed steadily as portable flamethrower operators tried approaching within their weapons' limited 40-yard range. Portable M1A1 flamethrowers carried only 5 gallons of fuel. Their operators faced concentrated enemy fire with no protection. The battlefield statistics painted a grim picture. Flamethrower operators survived an average of 4 minutes in combat. Their units suffered devastating 92% casualty rates. Every Japanese rifleman understood killing the flamethrower operator meant survival for their bunker complex. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Hart commanded the 754th Tank Battalion. He watched another Marine flamethrower team get slaughtered 30 yards from their objective. His subsequent report would provide historians with the genesis of American flame tank development. The portable flamethrower represented the most effective bunker reduction weapon available, yet employing it guaranteed almost certain death for the operator. A method to deliver flamethrower capability while protecting the operator had to be found. Hart's field modification on New Caledonia was crude but revolutionary. His maintenance crews removed the bow machine gun from an M3A1 Stuart light tank. They installed a Canadian Runson flamethrower through the pistol port instead. The fuel tank held just 10 gallons where ammunition had been stored previously. The system could fire for exactly 20 seconds maximum. At the Hornet's Nest, the improvised flame tank destroyed 28 Japanese bunkers in a single afternoon. The crew suffered no casualties whatsoever. Japanese defenders had carefully calculated fields of fire to stop infantry approaches. They had no contingency plans for flamethrowers that could engage from beyond effective rifle range while being completely immune to machine gun fire. May 15, 1944 arrived with new urgency. Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, housed a heavily guarded compound. Colonel George F. Unmacht assembled his development team there. The Chemical Warfare Service officer had received unlimited resources from Admiral Chester Nimitz after reviewing Hart's Bougainville report. Unmacht's team included Seabees from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion. These volunteers agreed to work 75-hour weeks. The challenge facing them was absolutely monumental. Japanese bunkers were now being constructed to prevent tanks from approaching within 100 yards. The fuel capacity of 10 gallons meant a tank could engage just 2 or 3 targets before withdrawing to refuel. The solution would receive the designation CWS-POA-H1, Chemical Warfare Service, Pacific Ocean Area, Hawaii 1. The specifications demanded 170 gallons of fuel capacity. Range needed to reach 80 to 100 yards minimum. 2 minutes of continuous fire capability was essential. The system required completely rewiring the tank's electrical system. Installing 1,100 electrical connections became necessary. Fabricating a false gun barrel to maintain deception was crucial. The fuel mixture required extensive experimentation as well. Pure gasoline dissipated far too quickly. The solution came from Harvard chemist Louis Feazer's napalm. This thickening agent transformed gasoline into sticky burning gel. The optimal mixture contained 94% gasoline and 6% napalm powder. This created a substance that burned at temperatures between 1,500 and 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. June 15, 1944, brought D-Day at Saipan. The 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions stormed ashore expecting fierce resistance from 32,000 Japanese defenders. Intelligence had actually undercounted by half. What neither side knew was that 24 M3A1 Satan flame tanks were coming ashore. They were about to introduce the Japanese to mechanized flame warfare. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito commanded the Japanese 31st Army. He had spent 6 months fortifying Saipan, according to Japanese doctrine dating from 1909. This doctrine emphasized aggressive counterattack. The concept of passive defense was considered distasteful to the Japanese fighting spirit. Captain Sakai Ober of the 18th Infantry Regiment later wrote about their preparations. They had prepared for everything imaginable: naval bombardment, aerial attack, tank assault. Contingency plans existed for American flamethrowers based on experience in China, but they assumed these would be carried by infantry they could shoot before getting within range. Nobody imagined the Americans would mount flamethrowers on tanks. The first Satan tank engagement occurred at 09:43 hours on June 16 at Chiran, Kanoa. Lance Corporal Toshio Takahashi manned a concealed Type 92 heavy machine gun position. His bunker had survived direct hits from naval gunfire. He watched the approaching Sherman tank carefully. His position should have been invulnerable. The tank approached to within 100 meters. He was preparing to fire at the infantry when suddenly the tank erupted in flame. Not a shell, but a continuous stream of liquid fire. It struck Sergeant Yamada's bunker directly. The fire entered through the gun slit. 10 seconds of screaming followed. Then silence. The psychological impact rippled through Japanese defensive positions like wildfire. At Hell's Pocket, Major Kiyoshi Yoshida commanded the 136th Infantry Regiment's 2nd Battalion. He received increasingly panicked reports from his forward positions. His adjutant, Lieutenant Hiroshi Ito, recorded in the battalion war diary the disturbing news. Men reported tanks that shot streams of fire. The flame entered bunkers through gun ports and observation slits. Men not touched by flame suffocated from lack of oxygen. There was no defense available. Yoshida's response, dictated by military tradition, was to order his men to display the Yamato spirit and die honorably at their posts. But the Bushido Code offered no tactical solution to liquid fire. The concept of tactical withdrawal, standard in German or Soviet doctrine, was unthinkable in Japanese military culture. Private Kenji Suzuki became one of 13 survivors from a company of 178 men. He later described the breakdown of discipline. When word spread that flame tanks were approaching, men who had sworn to die for the emperor began abandoning positions. They had been taught that death in battle was glorious. but there was no glory in being burned alive like animals. The Satan tanks at Saipan consumed 45,000 gallons of napalm in 25 days of combat. The flame tank crews, initially held in reserve, soon found themselves in constant demand. Infantry units refused to advance without flame tank support. The 8 M4A3 Sherman tanks, equipped with CWS POA-H1 flamethrowers that landed on Iwo Jima, represented the second generation of American flame tank technology. These vehicles carried 290 gallons of napalm with an effective range of 150 yards at 300 pounds per square inch pressure. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi commanded 21,000 defenders on Iwo Jima. He had studied American tactics at Saipan carefully. His defensive plans specifically addressed flame weapons. Positions must be constructed beyond their range or with multiple exits to prevent entrapment. The Japanese had excavated 18 kilometers of tunnels through Iwo Jima's volcanic rock. Ventilation shafts, multiple exits, and zigzag passages showed careful consideration of flame warfare. But Kuribayashi had calculated based on Satan tank's 80-yard range. The new CWS POA-H1 systems could reach 150 yards. February 21, 1945 marked D+2 at Iwo Jima. Tank Commander Staff Sergeant Robert Watson described the first engagement in detail. They approached caves at the base of Suribachi. Infantry had been trying to clear them for 6 hours without success. They pulled up to 120 yards beyond Japanese anti-tank weapon range and triggered a 15-second burst. The flame entered the cave and followed the tunnel system like water. Smoke vented from spider holes 50 yards away from the target. Superior Private Shigeo Hayashi survived by being in a sealed chamber when the attack came. His 1975 account provides the only Japanese perspective of what happened inside. Orange light filled the tunnel ahead of his position. The flame moved like a living thing, following every passage and turn. Men tried to run, but fire moved faster than human legs. The screaming lasted perhaps 10 seconds before ending abruptly. The northern plateau of Iwo Jima contained Hill 382, Turkey Knob, and the amphitheater. These positions were connected by tunnels with interlocking fields of fire. Colonel Thomas Warner commanded the 27th Marines and made a decision that became standard doctrine. No infantry assault would commence until flame tanks had suppressed the objective completely. The flame tank Dragon, commanded by Sergeant William Adamson, led the assault on Turkey Knob on March 3rd. Adamson's crew had developed reconnaissance by fire, using short bursts to reveal hidden positions by smoke, venting from concealed openings. In 4 hours, Dragon revealed and eliminated 27 Japanese positions. Captain Hirayuki Nishimura of the 2nd Mixed Brigade observed the flame tank's operational patterns carefully. He noted a critical weakness in their system. After approximately 60 seconds of firing, tanks needed to withdraw and repressurize their systems. They instructed their men to count the seconds carefully. When the count reached 50, soldiers in secondary positions would prepare to engage during repressurization. This adaptation led to the first flame tank destroyed by Japanese action. On March 5th, after a 55-second burst, a Japanese soldier emerged 30 feet away and threw a satchel charge onto the engine deck. 2 crew members died in the explosion. The American response was immediate and tactical. Flame tanks would operate in pairs from now on. One would provide conventional support while the other discharged flame. This tactical evolution became standard doctrine throughout the Pacific. March 9, 1945, brought the battle for the gorge on Iwo Jima. This narrow ravine contained General Kuribayashi's headquarters, located 75 feet underground, with 5-foot-thick reinforced concrete walls. The complex housed 1,000 naval troops under Captain Samaji Inouye. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Chambers requested every available flame tank for this assault. 6 tanks, the entire operational inventory, assembled at dawn. They arranged themselves around the gorge's entrance and commenced firing in sequence, maintaining continuous projection for 12 minutes straight. They consumed 1,800 gallons of napalm in this single engagement. Corporal Masao Watanabe became one of 7 survivors from the underground complex. He testified about the horror within. Fire came from all directions simultaneously. It entered every cave, tunnel, and position. Men tried fleeing deeper, but flame followed them, consuming oxygen as it advanced. Captain Inouye ordered counterattack, but men refused orders. This marked the first time Japanese soldiers disobeyed direct orders. The deployment of the 713th Tank Battalion, provisional flamethrower, to Okinawa represented the final evolution of American flame tank doctrine. This entire battalion consisted of 54 Sherman tanks converted to flamethrowers. They had trained for 4 months at Schofield Barracks specifically for this mission. The battalion's equipment represented pinnacle flame tank technology. The POA CWS H-5 system mounted coaxially with the main gun, allowing tanks to retain conventional armament. The flame projector, concealed within a false barrel, could discharge napalm at 4.4 gallons per second. April 7, 1945, saw the 713th land at Hagushi Beaches with 53 operational tanks. They faced General Mitsuru Ushijima's 32nd Army, consisting of 110,000 troops, defending 60 miles of interconnected tunnels throughout the Shuri Line. April 19, 1945, became the Black Day of American armor on Okinawa. The 27th Infantry Division, supported by 30 tanks including 8 flame tanks, assaulted Kakazu Ridge. The Japanese allowed tanks into a kill zone before opening fire with 47mm anti-tank guns, magnetic mines, and suicide teams. 22 American tanks were destroyed in 4 hours. This represented the greatest single tank loss in Pacific War history. 3 were flame tanks, their burning napalm creating pillars of black smoke visible for miles. Captain Robert Williams of Company A, 713th Battalion, provided crucial analysis afterward. The Japanese hadn't developed a specific counter to flame tanks. They concentrated everything against all tanks indiscriminately. American losses were proportional to the assault force. The flame tanks that engaged targets before being hit eliminated objectives as effectively as ever. Within 72 hours, replacement flame tanks arrived from Hawaii. Tactics evolved immediately based on lessons learned. Flame tanks would advance behind conventional tanks now. Infantry would provide close security at all times. Artillery would suppress anti-tank positions before any advance. May 12 to 19, 1945, brought the battle for Sugarloaf Hill. This position anchored the western Shuri Line with Half Moon and Horseshoe Hills forming an interlocking complex. The 6th Marine Division had suffered 2,662 casualties attempting to take the position through conventional assault. On May the 17th, Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Sable coordinated 12 flame tanks for Operation Blowtorch. The plan called for simultaneous engagement of all 3 hills, preventing mutual support, with 20 minutes of suppressive flame while infantry advanced under cover. Sergeant Michael O'Brien commanded Devil's Breath during the assault. They pulled into position 150 yards from Sugarloaf. Japanese soldiers could see them clearly. At 0615 hours, they commenced firing. The flame arced through the air, impacted the hillside, and flowed into every hole. He fired 45 seconds, then rotated back, while another tank took over the flame projection. Private First Class Yukio Miyamoto became one of 11 survivors from 400 defenders of Sugarloaf. They knew flame tanks were coming because they could hear their different engines. Colonel Meter ordered everyone to the deepest bunkers available, but flame found them through ventilation shafts anyway. Those nearest vents died instantly from the heat. Others suffocated as oxygen burned away. He survived in the furthest corner, holding his breath, then crawled through bodies to escape. May 29, 1945, brought the assault on Shuri Castle. This ancient seat of the Ryukyu Kingdom had become General Ushijima's headquarters. The limestone foundations contained a three-level command complex housing 1,000 staff officers. 6 flame tanks from Company A, 713th Battalion, approached from 3 directions. At 1400 hours, they commenced firing in coordinated sequence for 18 minutes, consuming 2,100 gallons of napalm in the process. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara served as Ushijima's operations officer. He described the underground perspective of the attack. The command post was 20 meters underground, protected by 3 meters of concrete. They thought themselves immune to any weapon. Then ventilation shafts glowed orange with flame. Temperature rose so rapidly that papers burst into flame spontaneously. General Ushijima ordered evacuation, but exits were blocked by fire. The 713th Tank Battalion's final statistics from Okinawa revealed mechanized flame warfare's incredible efficiency. Japanese eliminated, 4,188 confirmed killed. Prisoners captured, 49. American casualties, 8 killed, 1 missing in action, 111 wounded. Tank losses, 41 knocked out, 26 returned to service. Napalm consumed 200,000 gallons. The casualty exchange ratio reached approximately 598 to 1 in terms of killed. This exceeded any ground combat unit in the Pacific Theater. Military reports often cited 40 to 1 effectiveness when considering overall operational impact, including positions destroyed and strategic value. The inability to develop countermeasures demonstrated complete institutional breakdown. Japanese military doctrine, unchanged since 1905, emphasized spiritual superiority over material factors. Training manuals stated that material superiority must be overcome by spiritual superiority. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji admitted in 1962 that they knew Americans developed tank flamethrowers after Saipan. Reports reached Imperial headquarters regularly, but acknowledging need for countermeasures meant admitting Yamato spirit couldn't overcome American technology. Such admission was impossible. Technical solutions proposed in June 1945 never materialized due to this mindset. Project Mizuchi involved water curtains to block flame. Water evaporated instantly upon contact. Project Ishikabe used double walls with crushed rock. Napalm flowed around obstacles like liquid. Project Kazaguruma employed ventilation fans. Metal blades melted immediately. Increased airflow drew flame deeper into positions. In 1985, historian Dan King interviewed 100 Japanese veterans who faced flame tanks. Their testimony provides unique insight into the psychological impact. Corporal Toshio Kondo, burned at Sugarloaf, explained that death held no fear. They were already dead by choice, seeking honorable death. But flame tanks offered no honor. You cannot fight fire. You can only burn or run. Sergeant Major Yoshio Yamada of the 32nd Army had served since 1937. He faced Chinese, British, Australian, and American forces. Nothing compared to flame tanks. They removed combat from war, replaced it with extermination. Operating flame tanks extracted a psychological toll on American crews as well. Unlike conventional combat with instant death, flame tank operators witnessed their victims' agony in detail. Sergeant William Morrison, commanding Hell's Bells, described the experience. You'd fire into a cave and hear screaming for 15 seconds straight. You knew exactly what was happening to them. Some crews wore earplugs to block out the screaming. Veterans Administration records show flame tank crews experienced PTSD at rates 40% higher than conventional tank crews. The sounds haunted them for decades. The flame tank program remained classified until 1958 for security reasons. General Douglas MacArthur stated the flame tank saved 100,000 American casualties in the Pacific. Admiral Chester Nimitz assessed the flame tank broke Japanese will to resist more effectively than any weapon except the atomic bomb. The planned invasion of Japan allocated 720 flame tanks for Operation Downfall. Production reached 60 tanks monthly by August 1945. The Chemical Warfare Service stockpiled 2 million gallons of napalm for the invasion. The 713th Battalion's operations established principles influencing American doctrine through Korea and Vietnam. Marine Corps publication FMFM 11-4, Flame Warfare 1955, drew extensively from 703rd Battalion reports. The Korean War saw POA CWS H-5 Sherman tanks repeat their success against Chinese positions. Vietnam deployed M67 flame tanks, but political sensitivities led to their withdrawal by 1970. The POA CWS H-5 system represented remarkable engineering achievement. 290 gallons napalm capacity, 300 to 375 pounds per square inch operating pressure, 125 to 150 yard effective range, 4.4 gallons per second maximum discharge, 270-degree traverse capability. Napalm composition consisted of 6% aluminum naphthenate, palmitate, and 94% gasoline. This burned at 2,500 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 seconds after adhesion. Dummy gun barrels concealing flame projectors were visually identical to standard 75mm guns. This created paralyzing uncertainty. Any Sherman might be a flame tank. Japanese soldiers faced an impossible choice: engage what might be a conventional tank and reveal position, or wait and potentially be incinerated. Captain Hideki Yamashita of the 24th Division explained the psychological impact. Americans made every tank a potential flame tank in soldiers' minds. Men hesitated engaging even conventional tanks, fearing flame retaliation. Though only 54 flame tanks operated among 800 on Okinawa, Japanese interrogations suggested they believed Americans fielded hundreds. June 1945 brought the flame extension system. 400-foot armored hoses allowed infantry to project flame beyond tank-accessible terrain. Technical Sergeant Paul Rodriguez explained the concept. They turned every flame tank into a flame supply point. 4 squads could operate from one tank simultaneously. They called it distributed destruction. Private Tetsuo Nakamura was captured June 18th. He described Japanese attempts at defense. They dug deeper, made smaller entrances. Nothing mattered at all. Flame found them through cracks in rocks, spaces they didn't know existed. On June 23, 1945, organized resistance ended. General Ushijima committed seppuku after issuing his final statement. The enemy's material superiority has overcome our spiritual strength. Development timeline showed rapid evolution. January 1944 brought first improvisation, 10 gallons, 60-yard range. June 1944 saw Satan tanks, 170 gallons, 80-yard range. February 1945 introduced CWS POA H-1 systems, 290 gallons, 150-yard range. April 1945 deployed POA CWS H-5, 300 gallons, 125 to 150-yard range. Production totaled 354 flame tanks. 65,000 gallons of napalm were consumed. 22,000 plus Japanese were killed by flame tanks. Major Yoshitaka Hori, an Iwo Jima survivor, reflected on the impact. Flame tanks didn't just defeat them militarily. They invalidated their entire warfare concept completely. They prepared to die beautifully for the emperor. Instead, they died anonymously, burned from caves. Captain Tsuneo Shimura testified in 1951 about the broader implications. They weren't defeated by brave soldiers alone. They were defeated by American industry that conceived, developed, and deployed weapons they couldn't counter. Flame tanks were industrial machines processing death. By June 1945, over 10,000 Americans had trained on flame tanks. Yet Japanese intelligence never grasped deployment scale until facing them directly. Lieutenant Colonel Takashi Watanabe of Imperial General Headquarters admitted they received reports after every operation from June 1944. They dismissed them as propaganda. That Americans deployed hundreds of flame tanks never occurred to them. Military historians calculate flame tanks saved 50,000 to 100,000 American casualties. Each position eliminated by flame would have required frontal assault, accepting 30 to 50% casualties. Master Sergeant Anthony Romano commanded 3 flame tanks and reflected on the moral implications. People ask if he's proud. He's proud he saved Marine lives, but he's not proud of burning men alive. They did what was necessary, not noble. Colonel Unmacht reflected in 1970 on the weapons development. They stumbled into the perfect weapon-target combination. Japanese-built defenses proof against every weapon except the one they hadn't planned to use. They prepared for conventional assault. Americans brought liquid fire. General James Mattis observed in 2010 that the 713th Battalion proved you don't fight fair, you fight to win. They faced an enemy who welcomed death and defeated them with a weapon that made death terrible. This demonstrated the principle of saving American lives through superior firepower. Corporal Eugene Patterson, last surviving 703rd operator, died in 2018. He maintained that Japanese wouldn't surrender. They'd fight from caves with no hope, just to kill one more American. Americans could have spent months digging them out, losing thousands. Instead, they burned them out in hours. Given the same choice, he'd do it again, because every Japanese soldier they burned meant an American boy who went home. The transformation of Sherman tanks into flamethrowers symbolizes warfare's evolution from combat to industrial processing. Japanese forces prepared for honorable death, but faced mechanized incineration offering neither honor nor escape. The statistics tell part of the story. Behind numbers lie individual horrors: soldiers burning in caves, operators haunted by screams, paradise islands becoming crematoriums. Flame tank warfare was never glorious, only efficient. Yet that efficiency ended the Pacific War with fewer casualties than alternatives suggested. Flame tanks that terrorized Japanese forces into abandoning sworn positions ultimately saved lives by hastening defeat. Japanese soldiers discovered their enemies had industrialized warfare's most primal terror: fire, delivered through armored vehicles immune to their weapons. They learned American innovation transformed any defense into a trap. They prepared for warriors and faced engineers. They prepared for battle and faced extermination. They prepared for honorable death and faced industrial incineration. Flame tanks didn't just burn bodies from caves. They incinerated military philosophy based on spiritual superiority, overcoming material disadvantage. Napalm burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. No amount of Bushido could change that fundamental fact. The Japanese infantry never knew American Sherman tanks were equipped with flamethrowers until liquid fire began flowing into their positions. By then, it was too late for anything but screaming. The transformation was complete. Honor had been consumed by efficiency. Tradition had been incinerated by innovation. The age of mechanized warfare had arrived with flames that could not be extinguished by spirit alone.